Hey everyone, it's Sam. Last time we covered Turbo, which showed you how to replace different parts of the page, how to handle updates and actions in a nice interactive way. And today we're going to talk about Stimulus. And Stimulus gives you hooks into different elements and allows you to add nice interactions and update the UI with basically vanilla JavaScript. We're going to walk through the existing example that we built before, so check that video out if you haven't. And then we're going to add on these little interactions on top to make it a lot nicer of an experience. So let's dive in. So Stimulus is the other edge, or sorry, the other side of Hotwire, which is making little interactions in your app easier, using JS to make it more interactive. So one thing we might really want is like a loading screen. So say we hit this start button, right? Let's look at this. Let's go to the controller here. Let's say we hit the start button and it takes a long time to create this for some reason. Just 10 seconds. It's stuck, I clicked it, it's taking 10 seconds to load, but there's no indication to the user. They don't know that you've done something. It shows up eventually, but it's a very bad experience for the user. So what we'd really like to do is replace this, button with a sort of loading area or skeleton or something, so that if it is slow, the user isn't, confused, like, why is this taking so long? They might be confused why it's taking 10 seconds to hit a button, but at least they know that it's working and they can't hit the button like 100 times and break your application. So how does Stimulus work? Stimulus works by these little things called controllers that you put in your JavaScript controllers section. You can name them whatever you want. I have this little one called loading controller. These will be automatically loaded into your application as long as it fits the convention of the name underscore controller.js inside of this folder. And we do this loading controller. And basically, I wrote this earlier. All it does is identifies a target, which I'll show you what that means in a second, and swap to loading. So it defines a function called swap to loading. And what swap to loading does is it creates a new div, a loading div that has the same height as the element that we're swapping, and gives it this class called skeleton, which is just some CSS that I wrote that sort of strobes gray and white, which makes it look like it's loading. It's just CSS and JavaScript, so obviously you can update that to be whatever you want, but this just makes it a little bit sort of an easy to use thing to swap an element for a little loading skeleton screen. So it's called loading controller. So let's go into back to the index page. So how do these get loaded onto the page? You add this data attribute called data controller, and then you give it the name loading. That means that this controller is registered inside of this element. So like inside of this swap to loading, we use this dot element. This dot element is going to refer to this div here. And it's just JavaScript, so you can manipulate it however you want. And so then we want the target, which is what we want, the swap target. I could have written this so that every child inside gets swapped out from the element, and I didn't even have to do this swap thing, but maybe you want to change the size or something. I just thought sort of more flexible this way. So let's, we want this form to be swapped. So if it's let me just make this bigger. If it's a sort of ERB item here, we can use this data keyword argument, and what we want to do is say controller target. So this just specifies what is the target for this, or what is this? We're registering the swap target on this element. So that's going to give swap, and then we want to list out all the targets here. And then how do we use it later? Well, you just use this dot swap target, and that's going to return this element in the form element. So you can see here that we want to, you can think about it in the sense of like when do we want to swap to loading? Well, we want to swap to loading on the submission of this form. So the other thing that Stimulus does is gives you nice, what's data action. If it was a regular element, it would just be called, it would be data action. But since this is this, we're inside this data hash here, and we're going to call the action on submit. On submit, we want to use the loading controller, and we want to do swap to loading. Okay. So if you had multiple controllers like loading and, for example, like save controller or something, then you could have multiple actions where like on, not on submit you want to save, but maybe on key down you want to save. And so on key down you go to save and the save controller, and you do like the auto save or something like that. So that allows you to do multiple controllers, multiple actions on various events, various JavaScript events. So everything looks good here. So that means that when we click it, it should swap it automatically to the loading. Oh, sorry, I missed a comma there. So let's check this out. No, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Swap to loading. So I missed this. I missed this here. This should be called loading data, loading target. Let's go back. So now we hit start, and it turns it into this little skeleton area. And now it, makes it feel like it's loading. Obviously, you could update the skeleton to say loading, or you could have a little spin around the inside, or you could do anything you wanted to. Let's say like something more likely, which is like 1 or 2 seconds. And then you can see how it works with just 2 seconds, and it looks pretty normal. The beauty of this is if you write your stimulus controllers in a certain way, we can reuse them really easily. So because this does the element, we can swap, like for example, in edit, we could add this loading. We could add this loading controller here. And what do I want to swap when it's on submit? Maybe I want to swap this whole area here. Just update this. What's it called again? It is called data loading target swap. Add this div. And then we put this. Now, there's some stuff to save, like forms. There is, default actions for stimulus. So you don't, for forms it's submit, so you don't actually have to write submit every time. So this action defaults to loading swap. And just move this class down here just to make sure that this still looks good. And so we can swap. You can see that it swaps. Now it's working quickly. We could do a sleep here to show you how it works. And that's gonna do that. We probably need to update it. It had like it missed one of those things there. You could probably, it wouldn't just be event.target, it would probably be like the element, everything inside of the element, all of the children, and then you hide them or update them. But anyway, we don't have to do that for this. But it goes to show how exactly the stimulus controller works. So let's remove that sleep. We don't need that. But the great thing about it too is we can reuse this, obviously. And we can make a bunch of different ones for use for various other uses. So like we want to have that. I'm gonna remove this animation because we don't need it anymore. And so we want this to count down, for example. So we could create a countdown controller, which I did here. And I'll upload all this to GitHub so you can check it out. But basically, you can do whatever you would normally do in JavaScript, but then you can reuse sort of this logic into different areas. So, for example, like if we're editing and we want to be able to so let's look at this. I put this in a so let's add this back because I just removed this earlier. We want this to be a countdown element, and we want to add this value. So we're adding the countdown value. So the value is ends at, and let's look at this. Ends at means I have these sessions running for 90 minutes. Ends at is 90 minutes from when it started. So you can actually set values in here from the ERB, and then it makes it easy to reuse those values in JavaScript. So they're called values instead of targets. So value, we're going to call this one countdown2, and you have to give it a type, so string. And then inside of the partial, we can do data countdown to value. Countdown2 is this. You just have to change from camel case to kebab case. And you use the name of the controller, countdown controller, and then at the end value. So countdown to value. Sort of confusing, but since I'm reusing this, we could just say 2 countdown to just 2 value. It's not, as great. Maybe it'd be a little easier to understand, but in this area, but I like to be a little bit more explicit. So we just add the ends at, and then this is just JavaScript. I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but we create a date and then we count down from it based on how many seconds are left. So, and that updates this span. So now you can see when we load it, it loads the time left, and then it does a little countdown for us. And that's great and easy to do. I also like to have it in the title of the document, so you could do something like that. You could do like document, I think it's called document.title. So let's just say this is, and this is fine. And as you can see, we're starting this inside of an interval. So once we connect to the page, we want to run this every second so that it looks like it's actually a countdown, obviously. So we do set interval, we save the interval, and then on disconnect, connect is a special function that's called anytime a controller is added to the page or connected or rendered on the page. And then disconnect, we clear the interval, or if the distance reaches 0. So let's go back and check this. And you can see like the title is updated now too. So I can see the countdown when I'm looking at other things while I'm browsing. Great. And so for the final thing, I just want to show you how to autosave. So autosave is something that you usually want when you're writing. So I made this autosave controller, gives you a URL and hits save, and it'll do a fetch in the background. So you can use JavaScript, obviously. You can use Ajax still as you would if you want to do something in the background. That's something that's great and supported by this. So let's look. I have this is going to our update controller, and I just have it sending back head okay. Maybe if you want to be more explicit, you might update this to like autosave endpoint or something like that, so that you know it's different from like the normal update endpoint, or modify the format. But for this, it's easy to just show how this is working. So let's go to the edit page. So how does this work? Well, it actually works pretty easily. Call this autosave. What it does is it looks for the form inside of the element. So we have this, and then it has this form inside. And then we want to just take the form data and do a patch request, and it gets the CSRF token from the meta tag, which Rails puts nicely for us. And then all it does is just submit that request and does nothing. Doesn't matter because it's just auto-saving in the background. And so we can determine, maybe on connect we want to save every second, but really only for me, I just want to save when the text area has a space. So I don't really want to be auto-saving every second for no reason. So let's do space. Anytime someone types a space, we'll do autosave save. And let's just make sure all this works. So we go here. Hello, my name is Sam. Oh, I have an error here. Oh, because I didn't add the URL value. So let's add the URL value here. And we're just going to want that to be a log entry path and for log entry. Let's update that, and let's say we are auto saving. Now you can see, because we have the WebSockets and set up to the after commit, all this stuff automatically gets updated. We didn't have to do anything to change that, because the stats get updated when the contents get updated. So we can see that everything is working correctly. This I find very distracting, but I am just doing it for showing how this works. Since it autosaves in the background, and if we refresh the page, everything's going to work and everything's going to be saved here because it just loads it directly. So we hit end session and it pops up right there again. All right, we made it through. That was pretty much a crash course in how to understand Turbo and understand stimulus and make an interactive UI. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe. Thanks.